Hello everyone, welcome back to the 12 days of Zentangle 2023. We are still working through day 10. This is part 2 of day 10, and this is a really fabulous ensemble piece we're working on for the last 4 days of this project, which is so exciting. If you are just checking in for the first time here, we recommend going back and watching our introductory video, which explains all about the theme behind Project Pack No.22 and this year's 12 Days of Zentangle. We welcome you to use your tools from the Project Pack 22 envelope, or if you don't have a Project Pack No.22, please find whatever tools you have available to you and make it work. We are pretty excited here at Zentangle about this project, and my name is Molly. I'm excited to be here with you today. We're going to take this beautiful ensemble. Martha just added this spiral here, which is absolutely fabulous. And when I see something like this, I'm just like, I actually just want to grab my pencils and start shading. But I'm going to be so patient here and wait, because I think it's going to be better to shade everything later. So we're going to be filling in our tangles and then going back with our pencils later. But the potential is just so inspiring here. So as we talked about before, we're kind of playing around with taping our tiles together as we work on them. So this piece that Martha had worked on earlier, I'm going to put aside, and I'm going to just be working on these 2 pieces here. It doesn't really matter. We're working each kind of spiral at a time. So whatever spiral you want to work on next is fine. I'm going to work on the one that's opposite that, just to kind of space things out. And I am going to tape my tiles together. I'm going to double check they're in the right, orientation. And then I'm going to turn them over, and you can use like a little masking tape, or washi tape actually looks great because it comes off really well. But it is helpful, I think, for this project, so then you have your pieces like nice and put together. And I'm just like Martha did, I'm going to be working in this beautiful spiral shape that kind of comes around and kind of flows into that other tile. It's just so beautiful and so exciting to play with. And so I'm going to have my tile all set to go. And then for the most part today, I'm going to be working with this brown 05, which is one of my new favorite pens. I feel like I keep going for it. So that's my brown 05, comes in the project pack. And for now, that's all I need. So once you have your materials ready, and maybe you've kind of organized your tangling space, and maybe you've adjusted your chair, and whatever it is you need to do to get yourself into that space that feels good for creating, I invite you to take a moment before you begin for the first step in the Zentangle method, and that's gratitude. Gratitude is so powerful, and sometimes I feel like if I really put that intention forward to take a moment for it, it really changes my whole experience. So every time I can force myself to remember to just take that extra moment, it really does help. And sometimes I find myself even just with a little smile on my face, feeling so grateful for whatever it is in that moment that comes to the surface. Allow yourself a moment to recognize your breath. And try to hold on to that tool to use your breath to guide you throughout your whole practice. At any point in time, you may find yourself holding your breath or holding on to tension. Perhaps try to use the breath to release that tension and release that energy. Give yourself that space. When you're ready, I invite you to pick up your pen, and you have this beautiful kind of duo tile in front of you, which is nice. And I'm once again going to be working with dividing up my spiral into sort of these radiating lines to create sort of channels for our tangle. And everybody kind of does that a little different. And I think Martha did this as well. I like to sort of actually take my pencil and sort of create a little bit more of a spiral. Just to give myself something else to hold on with. It's like finishing the spiral a little bit more. So I'm going to be doing a series of double lines similar to what Martha did. And I'm going to start here because that feels like a little bit easier. I'm going to go around and then I'll come back in and do that sort of tiny area. So my spirals are going to come out. I like to have it's like a subtle flare at the end. And you can get a handle on like sort of my spacing. Sometimes you just watch for a minute. Again, sort of radiating out from the center of this spiral. And there isn't like an exact rhyme or reason to what that spacing is. You can kind of eyeball it. If yours is a little bigger than mine or a little smaller, that's okay. Work with it. I think that's what makes everything a little unique. I'm going behind my beautiful poke leaf here. Yours may or may not be in the way yet. Obviously now you're gonna lose track of where the next one is. This is here. So I want you to look at yours and try to figure out like where the next ones are gonna kind of, it's almost like it's opening up. So these kind of get a little bit, so I'm gonna say there's probably one like right here, and then there's one like right here. So I'm gonna guess that, and actually this one probably comes up here. I didn't even think about that. There we go. Till you get all the way to the end. There we go, that looks pretty good. So now I'm going to go back to the beginning here and get those ones. And those ones start to kind of get a little bit closer together. If you imagine all of these kind of unfurling in, they would get a little bit closer as they got towards the middle. Just taking my time. And this gets kind of, you know, not really sure what's happening there, but it's going to be a gesture of it all kind of folding in. So I wouldn't worry too much of being too exact in there. So once we get back there, we're going to add shading. And the idea is that the pattern seems to be kind of folding in on itself. So don't worry about figuring it all out exactly. All right, so I have my spiral metered out pretty well here. And like I said before, I like to start sort of in the middle and then go back to this small area because then I kind of understand the tangle I'm working on and can kind of explore it a little bit more with like, it's like I'm warmed up by the time I get there. So I'll start over here, work my way this way, and then go back. I'm going to be working with a tangle called Betweed. I actually think there's a really old video my mom does with Betweed, and it's wonderful, and I think she does it totally different. So here we go. So I am going to go with a downward stroke here because that feels good to me. And I'm going to start from this corner up here and go across and use that as my starting line. So Betweed is like it's not just a diagonal line. If you noticed, I kind of wanted to make that the beginning has a little slight curve, and at the end I want to land on this edge so that it kind of gradually lands. So it doesn't just like butt up to it, it has this really graceful landing. Now I'm going to go from about a third of the way down, and I'm going to create another one. And again, I'm going to do a little curve and then land. And then I'm going to go from about a third of a way down. And this stroke is going to be about parallel to the one above it, if you can see that. So to get an idea, and land. So this line and this line are parallel. So when we go to the other side, and I'm about a third of a way down, this line and my new line will be parallel. Takes a minute to get the feeling. Maybe you play around with it on another piece of paper for a second. And then once you kind of get the rhythm, it's really a tossing back and forth. And what you find is you're sort of playing around with this spacing. So you're like, you've gotten a feel for what the spacing is. Back and forth. Back and forth. And so you see these lines are parallel, these are parallel. And what we've ended up with is really this beautiful weaving like a braid. And then what I like to go back and do, and this is actually part of the original Tangle, is add this little bit of weighting right at the top. I'm doing this with my 05, but if you feel more comfortable doing that with your 01, you can go ahead and do that. And I think this really makes the Tangle. It brings it to another level. Maybe a little bit at the top there too. So I might do this one right here. This feels like a good space to me, and then I might work the other way. So let's try this again. Follow along with me, and then I think you can take it on your own. I'm going to start going the other side, but you can, or the same side, but you can start going either direction. It doesn't matter. And you may kind of adapt your own style of between taking the same idea, but, changing things up a little bit. And that's a beautiful thing too, so. And then going back and adding that little bit of weighting. Some people may have heard this story before, but the Tangle Between was named after a situation. I believe it was a blog or a newsletter. And although we have many proofing stages here, we are a small but mighty team. And our blog went out with a typo in it. And instead of the word between, the word betweed was written. And we had a few people correct it, and we had tried to adjust it, but we sort of played with it for a long time as, so instead of saying the word between, we started always saying the word betweed, and in the end it became the next Tangle to live. So when we come to a space like this where there's like stuff going on, I think sometimes it is a little challenging to figure out, where things are, but you just kind of have to guess. So I am going to guess that this line is going to kind of go like this. And then I'm going to guess that it's going to kind of go like this. I'm not really sure, but we're going to play around with that. And then, because we know they're parallel, probably one here. So just eyeball it. Sometimes doing that drawing in the air thing. I think we're still probably on this side. just imagining what's happening. There's probably one that went right there, so there's probably one more. Finally, so again, going back, added those little bits. Here's going to be even more difficult because obviously it's stuck in the middle, but I think we can guess by just putting these sort of parallel lines down on either side. There we go. Something like that, right? I'm going to go ahead and try to fill all these just as the others. All right, so I'm making my way over here, and as it gets smaller, you have to do a little more guesswork and kind of imagine where you're going to start. I'm just going to sort of start because I see that this has, like, you know, that slant. Maybe put one right there. Maybe one here, and imagine there's one up there. So it's just a guess. Something like that. Here it's getting even tinier, so it's trying to kind of figure out what's going on here. A little guess here. Like I said, once we add shading, it's just going to be almost, I think this is all we can do there. And we'll add a little, I mean, if you even want to, once we add the shading there, it'll be just the tail off as if it's betweeting out into nowhere. A couple more over here as it gets smaller. Maybe the space between the lines. See what I did there? Gets a little bit smaller as we work our way. Just take your time. Perhaps pay attention to the way you're holding on to your pen. Let go of some of that tension. Let go, maybe that little bit of tension in your arm and your shoulder. And just breathe through your lines. Take your time. Revisit the tops with these just little delicate strokes that add just a little bit of ink there. So we're getting closer and closer in, and just like when we got to that end, it just becomes a gesture of what that tangle is, and it doesn't have to be so exact. A little rhythm of back and forth. But it's really going to get kind of, you want to go through the motions to make sure you get some sort of expression. But it's really going to get changed a lot when we do the shading and everything. But it is worth it taking your time to go through. Oh, I love between. It's a great tangle. So before I leave you here, I'm going to add another detail. And so I'm going to go revisit these original kind of bands that I put in, and I'm going to orbit up. I am going to add a series of orbs inside each one of these columns. It's just adding more layers and depth and interest. And any one of these things can be either added or left behind, so that's up to you. And I'm going to go ahead and do that on every single one of these columns. Okay, I did the same here. As it got so tiny, you just kind of have to smush them in there and see how they work. So we have all of our orbs in, and as I was doing my orbs, I was thinking, I think that this spiral could really use some contrast. So I saw an opportunity, and I'm going to invite you all to either join along or say, no, I don't like that idea, which is totally fine too. And I see that at the bottom of my betweed, I've made, by default, there's sort of these little triangular spaces. And I'm going to kind of experiment with filling that bottom one in. Maybe rounding off the bottom a little bit. Just a little detail. They're all just little details, and they become big ones. Just playing around with it. A little ink is always nice, and I thought that could maybe be a cool one. So you can always go back and do it later too, so that's an option. Oh, this is a guess here, and I think maybe I'm going to add a little bit, because maybe I'll ink in all that. Who knows? You can kind of guess. I think that'll be good. Taking your time. Like I said, this was like, this is how it develops, you know, a tangle develops. Is like you see an opportunity, and this one I'm like, I think I'm just going to color in that whole thing. See what happens. Had a smaller one there, but same with this one. And I'm adding like a little roundedness to the bottom there, just to play around with some dimension. See what happens there. Okay. And I might go back and even make that a little more rounded. Kind of fun. All right, so we've kind of added a little bit of ink just to sort of break it up, and I'm going to add a little bit more ink just to finish with you guys, because, you know, I just can't put my pens down. I'm going to pick up this kind of peachy ochre color jelly roll. And I'm going to simply ink in these orbs. All of these steps take a little bit of time. So if you want to not do as much, you can easily, I might leave a little sparkle there too. Why not? I don't have to do it on all of them, but maybe do it on some of these bigger ones. Just a little bit. Just like we did before. Oh, that's kind of fun. So I'm going to play around with that. This takes time. Find your rhythm. Enjoy. Take your time. And if this isn't up your alley, then just leave them plain, because that's cool too. I'm sure they'll look beautiful. So there's always some other way you could shade it or explore it. So maybe you have a different color jelly roll you want to play with. I'm kind of challenging myself to use this palette because I like to do that. These get smaller. I'm gonna kind of let go of the sparkle. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that on all of my columns. So I've journeyed my way through all these beautiful columns full of orbs, just finishing up here. So we've got our betweed, we've got our orbs, we've got a little ink here, and this spiral is patiently waiting to be shaded. Thanks so much for joining me today. We'll see you again to fill in those next two spirals. Take care.